So we are talking today with Dino Davis, who's a candidate for the District 2 position, County Commissioner. So welcome.
Thank you.
To the Kitsap Sun editorial board. And what we do to start is give you 2 minutes to introduce yourself, tell us why you're interested, and we'll do some Q&A, and we'll shoot for about 40 minutes or so.
Super. Thank you all for being here. I know in the middle of the day it's sometimes difficult to assemble a group, so I appreciate that. My name is Dino Davis. I moved to Bremerton in 2001 with my wife in seeking a shorter commute and affordable housing. We didn't want to be a slave to a mortgage, and found the housing stock that we appreciated here in an urban neighborhood that was on the uptick. I still think we're on the uptick here in Bremerton. At that time, I was a technology implementer and manager for a business-to-business company in downtown Seattle, and did the commute for about 7 years. So I think I have an informed position on what that almost 30 days, when you compute it back, for some of us, you get back into your life. And the next stage of my life, we were able to make a decision for me to take a slightly less paying job here in Kitsap. It improved my quality of life considerably, and that's when I started, and that was in 2007, that's when I started really getting involved in the community. It started with attending a class at OC for Sustainable Building Advisor, which I did complete and get the certificate of. And then as that technology world waned and I got into real estate, I found that because our community is smaller than the Seattle or Snohomish County where I grew up, it's a lot more responsive to those who are involved. And so it started with Shoreline Master Plan with the realtors, and then code enforcement through the fire department codes that were being written about 4 years ago. And then when Carol Ahrens decided to retire, I decided to go ahead and step up and run for the seat that I hold now, which is Bremerton City Council District 5. I've had a lot of success there I'm now the vice president of the council, and it just is the next logical step for my progression to seek this office. I see where I can get a lot of that same input at the next level.
Yeah,
and that's my goal.
Cool. That's kind of what we wanted to ask about, actually. So that was one of my questions. You've got experience on the city council. Reading your website, there are definitely city issues you're pointing towards as where your experience is. In Bremerton, obviously, your home, where you've been involved. So tell me how that translates to a different role where the scope is different, the communities are different. You're talking about rural areas that are very important all of a sudden. Why are you interested in that, and how does what you've done translate into kind of different issues, some different issues?
Okay, that's a great question. My current career as a realtor, I'll work in Hansville 1 week, and then the next week I'll be in Key Peninsula. And the one thing that keeps the central and south part of Bremerton and into the rural areas disconnected is the problem in course. It's the single point of failure of the transit system, of the surface transit system. It always has been, and it's getting worse every day. We all know about the 2 times a day, where you just simply avoid it, which is horrible for commerce. But then if there's any incident, even a breakdown in the center lane, it grinds to a halt. And what that does is it makes the people in Port Orchard South go to Pierce County and spend their money and shop instead of shopping with their neighbors. And the people from Bremerton go to Silverdale and spend their money. And so in order to maintain this growth that we're seeing in Bremerton and have it spread out to where we're seeing a resurgence in Main Street, you have to be able to get to Main Street. And so I looked at it, and the bed study that was done started in 2009.
What study?
Bremerton Economic Development Study. And that was a multi-jurisdictional collaborative study that took a very long time, cost a minimum of $660,000 that came up with, guess what? The traffic in Course is bad. And it's dangerous, and it needs to be fixed.
What could the county be more proactive at doing? What's your role there?
The county can be, well, I'm just gonna flat out say it, they could be a more vocal leader, you know, and that's the other informed position that why I'm running is I see a lack of active leadership. And there's definitely things that the commissioners should be involved in day to day and know their, you know, their swim lane, if you will. But in working with, like Washington State Department of Transportation, who one of my opponents says is impossible to work with, we've got a 50 cents on the dollar replacement of ADA ramps on Warren Avenue. And that's from building a partnership through effective hiring, supporting our Public Works Department, and being vocal leaders that we are here to improve things. So that project, as an example, they're going to repave Warren Avenue, the state, because it's a state highway. And every intersection it touches, they have to improve that intersection. And because they know we're a proactive, agile group, they came to our Public Works and asked, would you like us to fix the rest of the ramps for half price while we're there? And of course, we said yes. There's money on the table right now nationally, $550 million through Senator Cantwell's FAST Act. It's Freight and Surface Transit Act to fix corridors, and one of the corridors listed is our Highway 3 for the military industrial corridor, and nobody reached out to them. This thing's been coming for 2 years, and just now PSRC has a focus group, but Cantwell's office came to Bremerton to ask us to try and put together a program. And my question is, why wasn't the county, you know, steering this ship right away as soon as it made it out of committee? You know, and Bremerton can't bond a $200 million job. It's $200 to $257 million just to fix what's there today. No future planning, just to improve, you know, fix the bend, widen the rail bridge, and restripe it. It's about $200 million. Route 3, from its connector from where it leaves Bremerton and connects to Highway 16. And you know, we can't bond a $200 million project by ourselves. KRCC can't put that together either. You know, their biggest project to date is the Buckland Hill Bridge, and you know, it looks like it's going to be a success, but still, that was something they could shut down, fix, and replace. This is
Can I
something.
just ask?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I understand this. The amount was 550 million, that was total for FAST?
Yes, that's for
And
FAST.
you were thinking that 250 million of that would be for this State Route 3
No,
improvements?
I'm commingling
Okay.
my
Sorry.
ideas here. The amount available in the FAST Act
Okay,
nationally is $550 million.
got it.
Our little portion, our little project that would qualify to fix what's on the books now would be $200 million.
200 million.
And nobody has asked the federal government for that money.
I mean, that's quite a bit of the total amount.
It is, and somebody's gonna get probably most of the total amount. So, the way those things
So
work.
your feeling is, well, we might as well ask for it.
You start the discussion, and this circles back to my original point, is if you are in the discussion and you're agile and you're proving that you're able to work, when things like this come around, it comes to you first. Why did Senator Cantwell's office come to Bremerton and hold a meeting and try and get us to participate in this program and not the county?
Do you have a vision on what the solution to the course issue is?
It's
There's a lot of ideas out there.
there's a lot of ideas out there. The latest idea that I've been talking to people about is a bypass. Some way of building another, because if it's $200 million to fix what we've got and it's gonna be obsolete by the time we're done, and a bypass costs between 20 and $25 million a mile.
Are you
Maybe.
talking about a bridge?
Not a bridge, an overland route that would give us a secondary connector. That would somehow empty out at the shipyard. Looking at just the bend, without a bridge, you're never gonna fix the bend. It's always going to be a choke point. Whether that becomes a divided highway to make it a little bit safer would be good, or if there was money like from FAST to put in a dedicated reversible lane, maybe that would help. You know, it's functioning as a limited access highway today when it's a business corridor. It's the same setup as Wheaton Way, but with people going 60 miles an hour, even though the speed limit's 40. And it's on a curve, and so I from what I've read, the first step is to make that a limited access, eliminate the center turn lane, would make it safer, which would reduce the number of incidents that are off-peak. I know the businesses in that neighborhood wouldn't be.
I was thinking
No,
that.
they wouldn't, but there is the turnaround, you know, and at one point you do have to make a public safety decision.
Yeah.
And that's the point of this job, is you have to make that big decision.
So is the work that's going on right now on Highway 16,
Yes.
to Gorse, is that more to favor Port Orchard? What?
That's to favor Washington Fish and Wildlife.
Fish project.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's habitat
Oh, there's
restoration.
a culvert situation.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
they're
so it has
making a
nothing
fish
to do
passage.
with traffic at all?
Nothing to do with traffic,
Okay,
and Bremerton had to reposition some of their utilities.
okay.
What about the reconfiguring of the feed-in from the shipyard?
That would be a part of it, yeah.
Is that already a go?
It's still a discussion. The issue with talking to the shipyard is difficult. Ever since sequestration, there seems to be a band of people missing. And so trying to get anything accomplished, whether it's the pedestrian tunnel or a discussion on changing up the shifts, so not everybody's getting out at the same time, to even which exit the worker driver buses go out.
But wasn't there
It's
a
really
design, engineering design already commissioned and done to talk about the feed-in by the sewer plant and to change the lane configuration?
And possibly a new parking structure, but it's still theoretical. It hasn't trickled down to actual programming. So it's still just beyond the theoretical design.
Let's go back to maybe county issues. Of
Yeah.
course, you play a role, but that's a state roads too. What I was curious, you mentioned your real estate experience.
Yes.
And that's something that takes you all over the county. That's how I took your answer to that question. It gives you a view and a connection with some of those communities. There's a comp plan process and update that's been going on for the last year and is finishing up now. I'm curious your perspective from, your business view of how that's concentrating development and things like that, and how do you think the comp plan's been handled? What would you do? What would you have done if you were in that seat during this process? Anything different? Any different vision you had of that?
Yeah, I have a couple of different visions. Number one, I would have solidified the leadership of the department. They've been looking for a replacement for CDC for over almost a year now, and there's no horizon in sight. So I would have elevated the interim to the full-time position, and because with a 3-person board, the comp plan is already highly politicized, because every vote is a swing vote and every motion requires a second, and so once you get a motion and a second, it's going to carry. So so I believe there was again that kind of vacuum of leadership at the very top level that led to a comp plan that is less visionary than we would like to see, because it is a 20-year document, and pushing the growth out of the pushing the growth out of the south to the central. I don't believe is a benefit for the people that even want to keep it rural, because that growth is going to pay for local programs, and if all the growth is happening in the center of the county, that informs back to my earlier point that they're not shopping on Main Street, and 80 cents of every dollar spent on Main Street stays in your community. And so even if you're living in, Seabeck or Olalla, and you're coming in to buy things in Port Orchard because we have a vibrant downtown and goods and services there, your neighbors, maybe you don't have any neighbors because they're all being pushed out. And then there was also a portion where they've changed about 15 parcels from one zoning that was closer to a residential usage and increased it usage now to 1 per 10 acres.
Oh, so they downzone.
They downzoned, and then they also made, which is now going to be debated after much pushback, there was originally going to be an elimination of legacy lots or pre-existing non-conforming language, which they have since pulled back on and are going to redress that. But had people in the room not been vocal about it and writing letters, that would have been straight in. And I think when you have a department that is highly trained and highly effective, that is the county DCD, it's a tough job. But if your boss, isn't your boss, if interim carries a lot of weight when you're doing these things, because if he's not going to be there next year, he can't make
So
political
who
moves
is
without
the-
it.
Who is the interim?
Oh,
It's Jeff Rowe.
yeah,
Who?
thank you.
Jeff Rowe, we met
Jeff
with him
Rowe.
a few weeks ago.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
But very, very capable man, and I think would do an excellent job at the top leadership of that job. And we're seeing the results of that, of, every commissioner has their
Do you see
entity.
and I know it's a kind of a long-term vision, but kind of the more density in the urban areas, which is part of this whole plan. Do you see that as realistic for Kitsap County? Do you think that's the right track?
I do, because we have natural boundaries to growth. We have a ridge line that goes right down the center of the entire peninsula that will prescribe growth into west and east.
Right.
And then there's also the traffic issues that separates north from south, and an affluence barrier. And so all these things come into a bigger gestalt of where will growth happen. And it needs to be mandated, and it needs to be thoughtfully thought.
Yeah, and some of it, of course,
Yeah.
is mandated. There's
Yeah.
only so much you can do. I guess what I'm asking is, your experience as a realtor, do you hear from people coming to the area saying, yes, that is where I want to buy, that is where I want to live? Or do you hear more people saying, I'd love to build out more near Olalla or near Seabeck if I could, but I feel limited?
I find the people that want the rural experience are able to find that still. It's shrinking, obviously, but there is still the ability to purchase existing stock. Developers want to develop close to resources, so they feel their impact fees are being well spent. And that's what they pay in the county. In the city of Bremerton, they pay SEPA fees. We're about 3 years behind on development levels as a region.
How do you mean that?
Coming out of the recession, other places that have rebounded on housing starts of new development are moving more quickly than Kitsap County.
Is that delay, of course, the recession is the trigger for all of that, but is some of that delay the county itself's own fault?
Some of it, unless you're an entity that's been participating with the county for quite some time, there is a learning curve, and that is something that outside development does not like. They want to be able to come, do their project, and leave, and that's just business, and that's a bit of a stumbler right now, and we hear that in the industry, whether it's somebody trying to put in an ADU or build a 3-house plat, or this new plat that wants to put in 2,000 rooftops in Port Orchard. You know, and that's, again, back to the leadership issue.
So let me
So-
push you one more step in that direction, since
Mhm.
we're kind of critiquing what's been going on, and with your opinion, you are a Democrat. You're running against
I
a
am.
Democratic incumbent. So tell
I am.
me, how do you separate yourself from the incumbent? You're from the same party.
We are.
How did this come about? Why did you decide to challenge someone who I would assume has similar views, but maybe I'm wrong?
We don't have similar views. We don't believe the same things. A great example is the Harper Estuary article that just ran in the Sun last week. She's claiming that as one of her accomplishments. I would say a project in danger of losing its federal funding because it is a year behind is not an accomplishment. You know, just because the study was successful and you got a great design, you got to get it to at least the shovel breaking dirt, I believe, right? So that's one failure. She believes that we're doing fine on a balanced budget, and Thurston County is only slightly behind us on number of deputies, and their guild is ready to sue them over unsafe work conditions because they don't have enough patrol officers to do the job. The average, and this is a mean average, so it's a perfect average, is 1.8 officers per 1,000 people. We're at about 0.68, and we've been there for a number of years. And so that leads to not only longer response times, or a lot of times deputies not coming, because if it's a property crime. I think it's terrible that our hardworking 911 operators have to ask you a dollar value if you think somebody's broken into your house.
Is that what they do?
On occasion, they'll ask you, you know, whether or not, if you come home and your home's been burgled, they'll ask you, do you think it's over $5,000? Otherwise, please report online. I don't know about you, but if I come home and my home is broken into, especially if I'm out in a rural area, I would like to speak to a law enforcement professional. I don't care if it takes them an hour or two to get there, but I want somebody coming to at least, you know, if there's somebody in the woods waiting and watching, I want them to see that green car pull up. And it's happened to me. It's happened to, you know, I had a burglary in process at one of my listings that a neighbor called in. I showed up on site about 45 minutes later, and I got the number of the sheriff's deputy because CENTCOM said there was nobody in the area to respond. And he said, well, I'll try and get there. Chances are there's nobody still in the house. That's not a risk I'm willing to take. Personally.
Oh, I see. So you didn't
Yeah.
go in.
So
and-
short of raising taxes,
Mhm.
how would you fund more, what would
Funding is always the hard part,
What would
but
you decrease funding for, and
you know, that is a really tough one, because it's not only the funding for it, it's the analyzing it on the forefront, because it's not just a money issue. If it was just a money issue, there'd be more of a clamoring from the rank and file. It's also a resource issue, it's a workplace safety issue, because deputies are working longer and longer hours. And so they're having to do more overtime to cover, because there isn't enough people to cover the population base that we have. And so finding another funding source for this issue is really the most difficult problem, you know. But I don't believe saying we have a balanced budget by adding 2 deputies over the last 6 years is effective government. And, you know, whether it's,
So essentially you're
What-
saying she's balanced the budget
Yes.
by not really addressing the problems. Is that kind of what you're saying?
exactly. And that's a differentiation, to answer the question, another one between the two of us. And then lastly, and I'm not skirting your question, it's very, very important, I just don't have a way to get funding into this framework of this question. And the last way we differentiate is this economic development and vision for the southern part of the county. Yeah, it's a beautiful, mostly wild place, but it is also a wild place that the tree farms that exist there are coming to the end of their usefulness. You know, more and more of those tree areas, there's either rot or they're no longer achieving the level of productivity that they want anymore, and so that's a huge issue. Housing shortages that are driving up prices and reducing access not only for working families, but also veterans are having a very hard time being able to use their VA to purchase. And as we don't actively try and make a regional solution to GMA, instead of chopping up the county into 3 pieces and saying, well, we want to keep the south wild, we want all the growth in the center, and we want the influence in the north, that is not tenable or sustainable. And it's a problem with only a 3-person board, because you're always going to get their own agenda. But I would be an advocate and supporter of a total solution for GMA, whether it links UGAs or urban growth areas from city to city through rural tracts, but not at the expense of our wildness. But it doesn't have to be one or the other. And so I would be more pro-regionality, and by region I mean our county, not that other big region. And I believe my opponent wants to protect at all costs the rural areas and the farming areas at the expense of growth in the south end of the county.
So you are essentially saying you want more development in the south?
I want smarter development in the south. When you don't have a plan that incorporates the entire solution, you're going to have, because as the pendulum swings, it increases momentum and carries you past center. And so you will have a pocket of huge development, like we're seeing at the top of Anderson Hill, because that is easily obtainable and the project's already there. But that's going to increase problems in traffic, fire, police, water system resources, all these problems that come with not having a regional solution. If it's just pointal and, okay, we can build 2,000 homes here, let's do it, boom, done, and then nothing else is happening, you'll have 2,000 families, which is about 12,000 people, with no resources beyond the edge of their neighborhood.
No resources being like stores or?
Stores or schools,
Oh.
and we're already seeing that problem in the south also. But back to your question of financing, is it a benefit district? We need another revenue source to really have an effective solution. The theory of growing our way out of it isn't going to get us all the way there.
So is 3 the right number for commissioners? Is 3 the right number?
Even though it's the job I'm interviewing for, I don't believe it is at this level. I can't think of another multi-million-dollar corporation that has a board of 3 leading it for 225,000 people. It's just not enough. And the rural parts of the county are relegated to hoping their elected official is mindful of them. There isn't an anchor, if you will. And that's one of the digs with me right now, is that I'm from Bremerton, and will I be more Bremerton-centric? And that's, to my answer to that is, well, my opponent, the incumbent, lives in Olalla. And so
what do you
there's
say?
a lot of miles in between those two.
So what would you say
So-
to a South Kitsap voter?
I say to them that every chance I get, I'm in the South. It's just so hard to get there. And
But you would be, you would stop working as a realtor.
Oh, absolutely,
Should you be?
yes, yes,
You have to
absolutely.
separate
Yeah.
yourself from.
And, you know, my wife and I, we take the foot ferry over and have dinner in Port Orchard. And it's a great afternoon, it's a great evening. It just has to end by 8 o'clock. And that's an issue, because it's the easiest way to get back and forth from Bremerton. Or really from anywhere north to south. So, so what I would say to that voter is that I'm first a citizen of Kitsap County. You know, we need better understanding that we're not these 5 cities, you know, separated by unincorporated areas. We are all connected, and I might have a slightly skewed view of why I would, you know, travel through the traffic to get to another main street, but it's because that's where my customers are, and that's where my commitment to being connected to them, as well
You know,
as the
it
voters.
strikes me listening to you though, that, I guess it's to follow up on Sue's question, that you're not gonna get all this without raising taxes. I mean, you want to improve transportation and you want, more resources.
Mhm.
So, I mean, doesn't that make you the south end, I mean, they're gonna.
Right.
Doesn't that make you vulnerable?
It does make me vulnerable, and finding the money is always the toughest part. And you know, and we're going to have to look at it. We just saw a school board levy fail by a handful of votes. That was,
Twice.
yes, but this last time was especially heartbreaking. And it wasn't a very big increase on taxes, and so that's a high, and I believe part of that is articulating the value, and this is why I am also against the sales tax version of the ferry funding, is because it is a regressive tax. It doesn't address the users of that tax, and so, you know, if we were to look at a solution for Gorse, like a reversible lane, maybe that's a tollway. You know, if we're looking at improving deputy protection, you know, maybe there's a benefit district that needs to be examined where urban areas are getting urban levels of service for rural prices. You know, it's not a popular thing to say, absolutely not, but it's a realistic thing to say. We don't have the revenue to accomplish the things that we need, and part of that is because we are not growing as a region. We're trying to grow as 3 separate districts. And so if you're gonna grow your way out of it, you better have some growth patterns that are very, very attractive to developers and families. And by squeezing and downzoning properties, even though it's only a few, it has a ripple effect. And so if your commitment is to rurality, how do we get more police? Because more horses aren't going to spend their money and pay taxes. So, to your point of me wanting to raise taxes, no, but it may be the reality in the near future.
Let me ask you one kind of policy, just you get your response on something that's going on. One of the things important to this board has been the mental health issues and
Yes.
homelessness issues, and of course, the county did establish a tax to try to start addressing those things. What's your opinion of how that plan itself, and what kind of moves would you see in the next couple of years to try to address some of these things that are going on in our society?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It really is. You know, the amount of money being raised is just the start to being able to have the resources necessary. It is, you know, we have I think it's over 200 children now attending school that are homeless. And how do you excel in school if you don't have a place to go study? You know, I mean, the resources to Kitsap Mental Health, you know, they're behind millions of dollars in their budget. It's really a tough one, and You know, Senator Cantwell again has an investment bill where she's trying to increase the money for development of affordable housing. And that's on the front end where you get a grant plus an abatement on taxes on the project later. Bremerton just extended their downtown model of if you build a multi-unit, you can, if you keep a certain number of units for affordable housing, you can get an abatement on the property tax on the project. And I would like to see that extended to more areas outside the county. You know, the need is huge. The Kitsap Housing Authority has I think it's almost 1,000 people waiting to get on the Section 8. And so it sounds a little bit like beating a dead horse or a broken record, but if we don't have a regionality solution and we're only building in pockets, that affordability index isn't going to come down and the availability isn't going to come down, so it's going to continue on an upward tick. Even if we do have a constriction in markets, it's still, there are no units for the people that want to buy. And that means there's no units for people to rent, and that's why we're seeing more and more of those affordable housing units going away. And that is a huge problem. And access to being able to create or maintain these opportunities, I think is very, very important and something we need to explore at a county level that we're not doing right now.
The mental health tax an appropriate way to?
I believe the mental health tax needs to go to mental health and addiction right now. We're at epidemic levels of addiction, and not just with opiates, but methamphetamine is still a huge problem in our communities. Access to mental health services. We're down to one clinical psychologist that accepts Medicare in the county. And so it's not enough of
Medicare or Medicaid?
Medicaid, sorry. And the 0.1% isn't a big enough windfall to even address the needs of the mental health right now. I'm glad to see there are other entities like health services over on 6th that are picking up some of the slack with an addiction ward that they're going to put out. I think that's very, very important, and we need, since we're still in a resource crunch, even though the recession's over, we need more partners like that, like Peninsula Health Services, where they're able to go out and self-fund through grant services.
Well, we're kind of rounding up to our promised time with you.
Okay.
Anyone else have a last question? But conclude it for us. You kind of did a good job of separating from maybe some of the other candidates, but I always ask, you know, a last statement. If there's something we didn't, you know, if you have a priority, I think you kind of gave a good glimpse of what's important to you, but if there was a priority that we didn't get to ask about, feel free, you know, tell us what that is and leave us with that. Or also just the last, you know, what do you say is the reason Dino Davis would do well at this job? Give us that as a last statement.
Well, first of all, thank you for your time, and I apologize, Sue, that we didn't get to delve into the funding portion of that more. Dino Davis is an effective team-building style leader. I think if you go to Public Works in the city of Bremerton, you'll find that that department finds me easy to work with. I'm not always in agreement, but when I disagree, it's a respectful disagreement and there's no backlash. And so we operate the street and the utilities as a utility for the good of the people, to get the people's work done. And that's what I would bring at the county level. It's a bigger job, but we also don't have a forest or a water utility at the county. So there is a couple of things that the city of Bremerton has that the county doesn't.
Bremerton has a forest utility?
An 8,000 acre working forest. All of those trees you see up on Green and Gold Mountain,
Oh,
and,
yeah,
and those are
that's-
protecting the water infrastructure of the Kitsap Dam Reservoir.
Huh?
So that is a massive undertaking, and the stormwater and wastewater treatment plant is also huge that we, and so while it may seem like a city councilman might be maybe a stepping stone to a county commissioner, and it's more work at the county commissioner because there's fewer peers to rely on, but the city of Bremerton is a huge entity and a huge endeavor that is not to be taken lightly. And I've been the representative for the city at the Puget Sound Regional Coordinating Council, where I'm able to network and get things done, whether it's fun and exciting from a business trip through that entity to Spokane, where I was able to bring a film crew to shoot on our Turner Joy for a national TV show, and that got us a little bit of cred. But I'm going to be a leader that, at the county level, that is accessible more than we've seen, that's going to be more agile than we've seen, and more committed to improving the life of the south part of our county. And a couple of things that if we can accomplish, either a safer feeling through the patrol deputy revisions, or getting a couple of cars off the road where we get a little bit easier commute and families can have a little more time together on that commute, be it across the sound or just from the shipyard south, then we can look at seriously getting some exciting things done, like a YMCA in South Kitsap would be great, a smaller one, so the residents don't have to travel 40 minutes